welcome back to Design for Impact. It's really good to see you guys come back. Today we're going to talk about an introduction to behavior change. And it's, I guess, a lot of these sessions I try to sort of do like the 80-20. It's like, what's the most important, 80% that we need to know to understand the topic or a concept or a framework. And, how can we apply that in our day-to-day life? So when coronavirus was hitting, Slovakia noticed that, their numbers were really starting to come up in terms of how many people are testing positive for coronavirus. So what they actually did was they ran a campaign, sort of a behavior change campaign, and that what they managed to do was they managed to test 3.6 million people in a single weekend for coronavirus, which is actually pretty impressive, right? Like looking at the population of Slovakia and looking at, a lot of countries have been struggling to kind of get their testing numbers up for coronavirus. Any idea on how Slovakia might have sort of achieved that? What would you do if you wanted to test that many people?
Well, my assumption is that they did a door-to-door testing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. That would be a lot of work there, right? If you have to.
Right. You'll have to hire probably a couple of volunteers who can do that.
Yeah.
By couple of, I mean thousands of volunteers who would go, who could go door to door, because they did that in Delhi when the numbers were rising. Yeah, they did that in the capital of India. They did a door-to-door testing for all families because they were just not able to keep the numbers under control, and now it's spiraled out of control again.
Yeah, right. That's interesting.
But yeah.
I was gonna say, well, Slovakia's population is 5.4 million people, and the land mass is quite mountainous. So I'm thinking from a geographical point of view. So people probably live in quite densely populated areas. I may be completely wrong. I'm just guessing here. I don't know nothing about the geography of Slovakia, besides knowing it's kind of mountainy.
Yeah.
So because it's quite a small country, it's quite easy to interact with people. So I think the geography had an impact of why they could test so many people, as well as the population size.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know the logistics, but maybe they did it through schools or major meetup places where they could gather loads of people to go through. So do you know when you go through a McDonald's driveway kind of thing?
Yeah.
I think they did that.
Yeah, that's actually what happened in Canberra. So what Canberra did, which is a bit different than Egypt, Canberra had like kind of drive-through stations and it was all free. Whereas Egypt, you actually had to, like, there wasn't enough tests. So they were charging people to do the tests, which is, different, completely different because it affects people's actually like ability and motivation to get tested. Kyle, what do you think they might have done?
My guess would be you'd want to meet people where they are. So have the testing done at workplaces, at schools, where gatherings actually happen, so you could hit as many people as possible, and where you got the most amount of risk, where you want to catch people.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's I'll give you the answer at the end. We'll talk about sort of behavior change techniques, and then I'll give you the answer at the end. So other problems that that people have tackled and are tackling kind of using behavior change is things like, encouraging people to take the medicine. So I think it's 75% of people that get prescribed a medicine don't actually take it. Getting vaccinated for coronavirus, people are kind of starting to think about that as the vaccinations are sort of coming out. Using bathrooms instead of the local lake. Helping people save for retirement. Like in a place like Australia, say it's really easy because your superannuation just gets kind of taken out from your salary as before you even get the money. But I think people in the US and things, they kind of have to consciously, Kyle, you can correct me if I'm wrong, people have to consciously kind of save for their retirement. And then the last one's like reducing overuse of antibiotics. So I'm like a typical like overuser of medication. I'm like, if I feel bad, I just want to take as many medications as I can to kind of stop it.
Numb the pain.
Yeah. So it's actually like behavior change is actually a pretty big thing. Obviously, it's not the only thing that people can do to kind of tackle, but often with kind of like long-term problems, kind of like say sanitation, or or things or problems like that, it's actually one of the big things that that kind of stops people from solving a problem. It's their behavior. People don't want to change their behavior. Some sort of thoughts that I think are really important to kind of keep in mind when you're thinking about behavior change is there's a fine line between behavior change and manipulation, right? So behavior change needs to be designed with the community, right? It's not, we're the government and we want our people to, change how they vote or things like that. It's like, no, we're kind of on equal, we've got equal power and we want to help the community kind of achieve better outcomes for them. The third thought is that buy-in is critical, and kind of, you've seen kind of a lot of examples where, government or organizations start to impose a specific way of thinking or doing things. And then, people rebel against that. And then the last really important thing is you need to understand the community and their motivations, right? So what do they want to achieve? So one example, Nepal has a lot of stunting, right? Where kids don't develop fully because of their nutrition or their lack of nutrition. So one of the projects that we were working on was actually talking to the community, and that kind of included like religious leaders and community leaders and the parents and families and things like that, to understand what's their motivation around, feeding specific types of food, and how can we kind of understand those motivations and help people actually, give their child the nutritions they need, which was really important to kind of actually make behavior change that stick. BJ Fogg.
Now, is that a rapper?
Yes, I have.
Oh, cool. Okay, he's not a rapper. He's a social scientist at Stanford University. He's the founder and director of the Behavior Design Lab at Stanford Uni. And he's also authored Tiny Habits, and basically he's authored the BJ Fogg behavioral model, which we're going to talk about now. He's a pretty interesting character, actually, and has a lot of good resources, both for sort of like behavior change as a person, but also kind of applying it to communities as well. So his behavior model kind of talks about like three things, right? And I'll give you an example. So he talks about like motivation, right? Like how motivated is this person to take this action? Ability, right? How much, how able is this? No, not BJ Frog. Ability is like how, like for example, if I say, you're going to run a marathon, is it sure the person might be motivated to run a marathon, but maybe they don't have the stamina to actually do it. And then the third thing is prompts, right? And if it's something that's, the person has the ability to do it and they're motivated to do it and there's a prompt, they're much more likely to do it. No, it's BJ Fogg, Fogg.
Thanks.
That's okay. The first thing is motivation, right? And he talks about like different types of motivation. So the first one is sensation, right? Is this like something that gives you pleasure or pain? Anticipation, right? If it's like, I want to run a marathon, does that sort of give me a sense of like hope or fear? And then belonging. So that's the three sort of types of motivations. Ability, he talks about lack of time, which is kind of what Pia was talking about in terms of exercising. The second thing is talks about high brain cycles required, which is like, how much attention or focus do I need for this activity? So for example, like, going out for a run around your street might not require a lot of brain cycles, whereas say learning systems thinking really might need a lot of focus. And then the third thing he talks about is non-routine behaviors. Like, is this something that I'm really not used to? This is like an absolute completely new behavior that I want to change. Kind of like for me, it would be like rope skipping, right? Because I haven't done that before. And then the third thing he talks about triggers. The most common kind of triggers or prompts, the most common things, like the easiest way to think about it, it's like kind of like your iPhone notifications, right? In terms of like that prompts you to, go on social media or prompts you to respond to a message or things. But there is actually different types of prompts or triggers. So the first one is a facilitator, right? So say, for example, I could say, like it basically increases your ability, right? Like I say, if you lodge your taxes now, we'll only ask you 10 questions, right? Or here's a shortcut to kind of get started with exercising. So it's something that makes the behavior easier. The second one is kind of like notification, like it's a reminder, like, you know, you haven't done this thing, please do it type thing. And then the third thing is called the spark, right? Where you're actually trying to motivate someone to do the behavior. So the first one increases your ability. The second one just prompts you to do it. And then the third one actually increases your motivation. Obviously you apply those types of triggers depending on, you know, whether you're lacking in motivation, ability, or prompts. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Any questions?
Abram, I do feel like, is it fine if you go a bit slower, please? Because I couldn't write everything down on the slides unless you send them out afterwards.
Yeah, I send them out on Slack.
Oh, okay, awesome, cool.
I'll tell you actually. So this is how I apply this for design for impact, right? So like, say for example, if we go back to the model, so to sort of encourage people to come to these sessions, right? Motivation, I might write kind of like a blurb on what you're going to get out of this session, right? So behavior change, we're going to talk about how you can change your own behavior and how you can kind of apply that for changing community behavior. Yeah, so that's kind of like, you know, here's something to motivate you. Ability is kind of like why, for example, I keep the sessions as like donation, right? So people can just pay whatever they afford. So it's not, you know, it's not like some people are unable to, you know, if I do it as like $1,000, then maybe people won't have the ability to pay for that. Whereas if it's donation, people kind of choose what they're able to do. And then prompts is like, I'll send an email out, right, every weekend or every Monday to say, you know, this is a reminder to kind of book the session. Does that make sense? So that's kind of how I apply it, like sort of for design for impact, to get people to remember or to actually sign up for the coaching clinic.
So where do we want to be on the line to engage in good habits?
So you
like
want to
form good habits.
So you want to be on the right, in terms of like, see the action line, you want to be on the right of that. Yeah. So you kind of want to have, like, you're pretty able to do the activity. You're highly motivated to do it. And there's a prompt there to help you. I'll give you an example of tiny habits. So for example, BJ Fogg has this concept called tiny habits. And basically what he gets people to do is sort of stack habits together. So say, for example, he said, like, I worked from home and I wanted to exercise a bit more. So what I did was I said, every time I would go to the bathroom, I would do 1 push-up, right? And then he would celebrate some way. So there's like 3 ingredients of this thing. It's like, what's the thing that you're going to connect it to? And for him, it was like going to the bathroom. And then what's the action that you want to do, which is, you know, and you want to kind of choose like the smallest version of that action. So for him, it was just 1 push-up. And then the third thing was around like, how are you going to celebrate? How are you going to kind of give yourself like feel good hormones to kind of create a positive feedback cycle, right? And that helped him kind of start exercising more regularly. So for reading, it might be like, you know, every time I look at my phone, I'll read 1 paragraph or something. Does that make sense? So yeah, if you want to kind of look into behavior change of your own sort of behaviors and habits, you can look at tiny habits.